Welcome to the Exotic Pet Collective, where we talk about tarantulas, scorpions, and all pets exotic. I am your host, Richard. You may know me from my YouTube channel, The Tarantula Collective, and today we have a special guest joining me to discuss tarantulas and mental health in the hobby. But first, this week's episode is brought to you by therapeutic.com. If you're looking for care sheets, a list of reputable tarantula and exotic pet dealers, exotic pet enclosures and supplies, discount codes, and tarantula and exotic pet collective merchandise, then be sure to check out therapeutic.com. Find all things tarantula and exotic pet related and stay connected and up to date with everything happening in the collective by visiting the website. And if you want to look behind the scenes and updates on everything that's happening, make sure you sign up for the mailing list so you'll receive the collective newsletter. That's at therapeutic.com. Today's guest is the author of The Ultimate Guide to Tarantulas, creator and editor of the Spinerette Magazine, and the creator of the Tarantula Heaven YouTube channel. Please welcome to the show, Patricia Colli.
Hello.
It is awesome to have you. Thank you so much for joining. So you're out of Philadelphia, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been keeping tarantulas?
So I got my first tarantula in 2013. So I guess 7 years or so. I lose track of that timeline all the time. And so that was my first one. It was a Chilean rose hair. And it took me a while before getting another tarantula. I had her for like 5.5 years before I even considered getting another one. So my collection is very small, but because I only have two, but I've enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, my first tarantula was also a rose hair tea. I think that's a great place to start. You got a second tarantula. You have a little spiderling, right? What was that?
Yeah, it is a little baby Arizona blonde. This thing is the slowest growing thing. It's still, I feel like I've had this thing for like 1.5 years or 2 years, and it's still the same size almost.
Yeah, I can relate.
Still very small.
And you have a YouTube channel, Tarantula Heaven. You cover some pretty interesting topics on that channel. I enjoy watching it because you talk about things that nobody else really discusses on their channel. What got you into, like, why did you decide to start making YouTube videos?
It was kind of just a fun project. It's kind of gone in its own direction. What I first intended to do was just share really cool videos of my Chilean rose hair, because I always capture her doing really weird stuff, which maybe we can talk about a little bit later. But tarantula behavior really, really interests me. I think that's the part of the hobby. Like, yes, I do think that tarantula care and doing that is very meditative and wonderful, but actually studying tarantula behavior and like documenting the weird stuff they do really interests me. And I think that's my favorite part of the hobby. So I wanted to document that. And then I was kind of like, well, I actually get a ton of questions about the weird stuff that my tarantulas do and also just regular tarantula care. So I don't know, I've gotten very inspired by what people ask me. A lot of times they're really weird questions, but then also just pulling from my own experience in being a beginning tarantula owner and even in trying to do lots of research, constantly being surprised by the things that I continue to learn about them and the things they do. So I do tend to like veer off into weird topics of like, one of my most popular videos is like, do spiders poop or pee? Which, is kind of silly. But that's one of my most popular videos. And it's like, there are actually people on the internet who are very curious about this information. And so I try to share that funny stuff too, because I think it makes people less afraid. And it helps them to kind of reorient themselves to these creatures, because I think a big part of my work is also trying to portray these creatures accurately, in that we're kind of like educating to reduce the fear around them.
I agree.
So that's something I'm really passionate about and something that I try to do in my videos. But my videos tend to cover a wide variety of subjects, whether it's like the mental health stuff and how tarantulas can be used to enhance mental health, whether it's about behavior or observations, tarantula care, my own experiences. So I kind of cover a range of things, but I really enjoy using YouTube as an outlet. because I think that, especially for tarantula keeping, I honestly haven't done too many tutorials, but I think that it's so much more helpful to people to see tutorials and images and explanations than to read it in a book, because these are creatures that are really foreign, and unless you can actually see a visual of it in a video or through pictures, then you might kind of miss it. You might not really understand.
Yeah, I feel you there. I think it's one of the best tools we have at our disposal to teach people, But you also have a magazine that you put out. Is that every month a new issue comes out, or is it?
Yeah, it's every other month.
That's what I thought. I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, I think it's every other month. But yeah, that's the Spinerette Magazine. And you have that available on your website, the tarantulaheaven.com. I want to say my website, but it's not on my website. So you have, so how did that start? What's the origin behind a tarantula magazine? Because if I'm correct, that's the only tarantula magazine out there, right?
Right now, yeah. Particularly in North America. I think that the British Tarantula Society has something that they offer. I don't know if it's still in circulation though, or if it's still continuing. There was a print tarantula magazine out a little while ago. That is not, to my knowledge, it is not in circulation anymore. And then there was also a movement by, I think, Scott Templeton from the Tarantula Keepers Facebook group. He had tried to start an online tarantula magazine or a tarantula magazine a few years ago, but I think he was trying to do it in print. And so he tried to fundraise or crowdfund the resources to get that off the ground. And I do not know if it actually did. So that was kind of what inspired me to go the digital route, because I wanted to create something and I needed it to be something where it wouldn't take a lot of resources. Because I was kind of just feeling really inspired of like why lots of animals have their own magazine, whether it's dogs, horses, like people get really into this, and tarantula owners or tarantula keepers are a very dedicated, fanatic group of people. And so like, why isn't there some sort of publication for them? And when I was doing some research and I realized that there wasn't one in existence, I was kind of like, well, I have the tools and skills to make this happen. So why not? And so I think it's been about 2 years So it's been fun. Yeah. And thank you, because you've been such an amazing supporter of the magazine from the start.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I think it's a really cool idea. I like having, I just think it's good for the hobby in general to have a lot of different like media outlets that because not everybody's on YouTube, not everybody watches videos, or not everybody's on Reddit. So having a tarantula presence in every form of media, I think it's only for the benefit of the hobby. It really kind of just helps get the word out there. And so you also wrote a book. It's a care guide for keeping tarantulas. Now, is that available in print, or is that just like a digital, like your magazine?
Yeah, so you can buy that digitally. You can also buy it in print. I tend to not encourage buying it in print just because it's so much more expensive. Because I don't have the resources to buy tons of them in bulk to make that feasible. So I use MagCloud as the service, and MagCloud has beautiful printing quality, but it's pretty expensive for that book because it's so big. It's like 200 plus pages. The printing of it, I think you'll pay about $50 for it. And wow. I like to do things that are really affordable and accessible. So I push the digital version a lot more. And I also think that there are things in the digital version that you gain that you won't get with the print version. So when people buy the print version, I always give them a free digital copy, because there are active links in the digital copy that lead to tutorials or products and things like that. So, or different websites and resources. And I think that having those active links in there is so important. And I also like the digital part because it allows me to, when the time comes, to update and add on to it. So my hope is that, once I gain more information, or if I need to update things, I can update that guide pretty easily. And then my hope is that being able to send it to free to all the people who have already purchased a guide so that they can continue having the updated version. Because I think that's a barrier with books, is that if there's a new edition, then you have to like buy another one.
What kind of stuff do you cover in your book?
So I think I haven't done a lot of stuff on bioactive stuff, but there's a wide range of things, whether it's like tarantula anatomy, I think there's even a part about how to pack and ship tarantulas or how to pack them safely, the basic like molting, sexing, how to feed your tarantula, tarantula body language, which is very important, what you need for an enclosure. So I've tried to cover like all the basic stuff, because I get so many questions about tarantulas. And also my biggest goal for that guide was to create a guide that was easy to follow, because there are a lot of really amazing guides. Like the Tarantula Keeper's Guide is like the big Bible in the hobby. And I think, so I've read a little bit of it, and it seems like some of the jargon is a little bit intimidating. And I think it's also, I think I heard they were making an updated version, but it's a little bit outdated now, at least the original version. So I wanted to make something that was easy for beginners to follow and also puts like a little bit of humor and my own fascination of tarantulas. So like we do talk about weird tarantula behavior and body language stuff that I've observed, because I think it's important for new tarantula owners or people who are thinking about getting into the tarantula hobby to be more curious than fearful. To talk about like things like temperament, mood swings your tarantulas might have, kind of giving them a bigger scope of what to expect, because it's not just the care. Like you have to know those things and it's important, but it's also about being able to enjoy these animals and like learning about them. That is like half the journey in being a tarantula keeper. So my hope is that I've really made it easy to follow. Especially with all the images and the links and stuff like that. But also more human, not really coming from a scientific standpoint, being able to provide like researched information that has citations and things like that, but also making it easy for like somebody who doesn't study tarantulas meticulously or familiar with all the complicated jargon, like being able to understand and learn and remember things too.
Yeah. I can get behind that idea a lot. I think one of the most frustrating things for me in the hobby is there's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of people out there that know a lot and are willing to share that information, but it's almost like there's a gatekeeping kind of aspect to it. It's like, I'll tell you what you need to know, but you have to know all the scientific names. I'm not going to use common names. I'm not going to explain what all these terms mean. And if you don't know what they are, I'm going to ridicule you. And I hate that kind of attitude in the hobby. I mean, in life in general, but you know, especially in the hobby. And it for a long time, that's kind of just been the standard operating procedure. It's just how it was. If you're new, you're going to get ridiculed until you learn better. And I think it turns a lot of people off. It's not the best way to kind of teach. And I catch a lot of flack with my videos, especially on like arachnoboards and stuff like that. People are like, he makes videos for beginners. And I'm like, well, yeah, because those are the people that to me are the most important, getting people into the hobby. So I want to explain the difference between an old world and a new world and what urticating hairs are and stuff like that. And that's one thing I respect about your channel a lot is that, you know, you talk a lot about different topics like that as well. I mean, really kind of if I've been, you know, somebody been keeping tarantulas for 40 years and was a scientist, I would find my content boring as well. Like I understand that, but that's not who I'm making videos for. So it doesn't, that kind of criticism doesn't really get to me that much. Like I understand it's not for everybody, but I think that having that ability to talk, you know, kindly and inform people about exactly what it is people are talking about when they say, you know, urticating hairs or setae, you know, like just break down those definitions, because not everybody reads the Tarantula Keeper's Guide before they get their first tarantula. And a lot of that, and if they did, a lot of that information is no longer acceptable in the hobby. So, you know, it's So you got to learn somewhere. So why not be the person that teaches?
Yeah, we're still learning things in this hobby too. So being able to recognize that, like, I might make a video, or maybe I even have made videos that, like, now that might not be true anymore. We're still learning. There's still limited research on tarantulas, limited studies. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I realize that more experienced people will come to my channel and be like, that is such a stupid video. But I love, I'm very proud that my tarantula is comfortable. My tarantula channel is a comfortable place for beginners. It's a place where they can ask those questions that they might not feel comfortable with asking in a group. So, you know, they can ask me stupid questions. I love it. Like, you can ask me whatever, because I've been there. You know, like, I am that person asking on Google, how does a tarantula poop or pee? Like, you know, like, we've all been a version of that person. And, you know, like, the beginners, they are the future of the tarantula hobby. We are also the future of the tarantula hobby, in that our observations and our care and the things that we learn are going to contribute heavily to how the tarantula hobby continues and the information that people have. And that's one thing that I think you do so well, Richard, is that, like, you do provide this really compassionate way to discuss tarantulas, but you also make it really cool and human too. I love what you've done with your channel and with your work, like, even from your website and your merch and stuff like that, and your podcast. It's amazing to see tarantula keeping in a way that is really cool, fun, and also, like, aesthetically pleasing. Because I think, like, we have so many amazing, respectable channels, like Tom's Big Spiders, Tarantula Haven, like, all of those great ones. But sometimes they're a little bit, like, they can be a little bit scientific, or the way that they're presenting is very, like, you know, like, I'm thinking about my own channel is basically me just talking to a camera. They're very much like that, and maybe a few shots of the tarantula. But your tarantula channel and your stuff is, like, so beautiful and visual and exciting compared to that. And so I really love that. Like, I was like, that's such a great addition to the hobby. And as far as getting more people involved and being able to see the beauty in these creatures and being able to enjoy them in all aspects. Like, I'm looking at your setup right now, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this setup is like a work of art. You know, like, this that you have. And so, you know, I think that stuff's really important too. Being able to show what the tarantula hobby can be. You know,
I agree.
Encourage people to learn more.
Yeah. I mean, I based my kind of cinematography, or how I wanted my channel to look, off of a lot of other videos I saw on YouTube about, like cameras, for instance, or cell phones, or any kind of tech. So a lot of times I watch a video about I didn't even know I wanted it, and I started watching it, and just they make it look so beautiful. It's almost like a 10-minute commercial for this phone or this piece of technology. And I'm like, that's beautiful. I want to add something like that to my collection. And I was like, why is nobody doing that for tarantulas? Like, why isn't there somebody that's doing slow motion footage of tarantulas that are well lit? And there was a lot of helpful information out there, and I agree. But I just want to do something a little bit different. So that was kind of, and I didn't know how to do it. So my first few videos are all, like, my first couple dozen videos are just me with a cell phone trying to do it, and failing miserably. But I learned from those videos. It's like each video was like, okay, that didn't work. I need to find some way to stabilize my camera better, or that needs more lighting, or now I need to work on my sound. So it's just like ever evolving kind of process, and it's embarrassing, like, how much time it takes to set that up and light. So I'm always, like, running behind with videos and stuff, just trying to get everything set up to look nice. But I think that it draws in, at least I've noticed from, like, my comments and stuff, people that never had an interest in keeping tarantulas, and just somehow YouTube suggested a video, and it was appealing enough for them to not click away, after 5 seconds, and they watched a little bit of it, and were like, I'm scared of tarantulas or spiders, but you really kind of made them look attractive, and now I'm kind of interested, and I'm watching more videos, and then before you know it, they're buying tarantulas, and they're part of the hobby. So it's yeah. So that's my goal as far as the channel is concerned. So as long as that's still happening, I'm not going to worry too much about people that are giving me crap, because Like, man, this last video I put out has been so divisive. And it wasn't even a video that I thought would be controversial at all. It was like a video I recorded for like my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members, where I was just, I got this like really long probe lens that has a light on the end of it, so you can like stick it down into burrows and stuff. And I was recording a feeding video with it, and just, you know, off the music subscription service I use for like copyrighted music, that was one of the songs I could use. And I was like, it's about the right length and kind of has the beat that I'm looking for, and threw it on the video and played it. And it is just like, people either love the music or they hate the music. And I mean, we're talking like dozens of comments of people like, the video's horrible because the music just ruins it. And I'm like, you realize you're complaining about the music on a tarantula video. Like, how ridiculous is that? You know, it kind of cracks me up. But it's like, you love it or hate it, you know. It's what am I trying to say? It's appealing to people that aren't in the hobby. You know, not every tarantula video needs heavy metal music in the background. So it's analytically proven, like through data, that type of music does a lot better than heavy metal music, or, you know, some like country music, you know, just as far as like getting people to you know, watch it, that especially people that don't, you know, normally watch tarantula videos. So it's like, I understand it's not metal or hard rock, and it's not your type of music, but I did make the video for you. I made the video for people that do enjoy that kind of music, that, you know, maybe aren't in the hobby. Because every channel has, well, not yours, but most channels have some kind of like heavy rock music.
Yeah, you know what? I was just thinking that is very stereotypical of the tarantula hobby, is to have like heavy metal music in the background or something. And I really like that yours is different. And actually, I watched that video. I thought it was amazing. I'm surprised that you got a lot of negative feedback on it, you know, geared more towards the music. But I think the shots were just so beautiful. I hardly even noticed the music. And I thought, like, I was like, this is so cool, because especially for beginners, but even for people who are more experienced, like being able to see that footage up close, and actually, like, it's one thing to intellectually know how a tarantula eats and how they attack. It is an entirely different thing to actually see it happen up close, like being able to get that footage and all the little intricate details of their movement and behavior. You know, one of your tarantulas made me laugh in that video, the one that you kind of dropped the thing and it kind of ran away from it at first.
Yeah.
Like, it was such a precious moment to me. I was like, this is amazing. I love the investment that you've really made in making such beautiful, wonderful content. And like, I have a background in graphic design, so that was like my first degree, and I know how much work you put into all of that stuff. Like, as an artist, as somebody who is teaching themselves how to use the equipment, like little by little, like, I just deeply respect all the time and effort and also financial investment that you've put into your work, because I know how much it takes to think about all of those things. And, you know, I'm sure even more than I realize, because I'm not somebody who's trained in film, but just the entire brand presence that you have and what you're trying to do with your work to like level it up is, I think people take that for granted. And I'm surprised that people do actually give you any sort of flack for it, because they have no idea how much planning and time and energy it takes to set up every shot and think about what footage is, and then edit all your videos. Like, I don't know if you edit them yourself or if you outsource them, but they're beautiful.
Thank you. No, I haven't I haven't tried outsourcing it yet. I think I have too many control issues for that.
Yeah, even more respect. To edit even my simple videos where I'm not putting any beautiful footage in, I'm just taking my bad edits out. It takes forever, you know, like, and so your videos that are actually beautiful and you've got music and everything matches so well. It's remarkable. So I hope people can really think about that. It's not just that it's great content, but it's also beautiful and entertaining and artistic. And, you know, I was thinking about what you said about, you know, starting off your first hundreds of videos maybe were terrible compared to what you're doing now. And you messed up and you learned. And I'm thinking, what a beautiful analogy for what tarantula keeping is like. We were all that beginner that fumbled and didn't use enough substrate and possibly dropped their tarantula. Hopefully not, but we were all that tarantula owner that made mistakes, and we've all gotten better because we messed up a few times, or we learned better and we got more updated information. So, like, to go back to your point about hoping that the hobby can be more compassionate and more supportive of all sorts of different education that's out there, and all sorts of different tarantula owners. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we all do start somewhere. I'm thinking about an interview that you had done for the Spinerette a few issues ago, where you talked about your first tarantula, and how, the internet wasn't what it was. We didn't have YouTube videos about tarantula care or all this amazing information. And you realized in going through your journey that you were taking care of this spider completely wrong. And like, I have that experience too. And that, like, there were things that I did with my Chilean rose hair that I do not do now. I wish I never did, because it was wrong. And so, being able to be compassionate for our journey as a tarantula owner, but also, like, what you think is stupid that's being asked by a beginner. Maybe you were that person. Maybe that was a question you had and you were too afraid to ask. I think we've all been there in some respects.
Yeah, there's no innate knowledge coming into the hobby. You don't automatically know anything, and I hate when people say Google it. Just Google it. It's like, that doesn't work anymore. Like, you Google it, there's 10, 15 different answers to that right on the first page. So they're asking you because they trust you and they want your experience, And that's one thing I try to tell people a lot in my videos, or even in person. Like, I'm just telling you my experience. I'm sharing the mistakes that I've made, the things that I've learned. I am in no way saying this is the only way to do it, or this is how you should do it, because I don't know your circumstances. I don't know the temperament of your tarantula, where you live in the world. Like, this is what I do, and just take that and apply it to your situation. But, get from multiple sources as well, and try to create your best husbandry for your species. And it bothers me sometimes when people have that attitude that it's my way or the highway. Like, this is the right way to do it. Any other way is wrong. It's like, no, that's not true in pretty much any other aspect of life. Like, that we don't learn and grow and develop and become better at stuff unless we try different things. So maybe we need to be a little more open-minded with some of the, like, if there's something that's been proven not to work, okay, we won't do that. We'll move forward. But there's still a lot to learn when it comes to keeping tarantulas in captivity. And I think we need to be a little more open-minded and not so quick to shut people down and judge. And
I couldn't agree more.
I have made so many mistakes. Like, even now, it's I still make mistakes, and sometimes it's out of just because I don't know, or sometimes it's laziness. Like, I know that I probably shouldn't keep that in that type of enclosure, but I really don't want to rehouse it right now. I'll do that next week or something like that, But I learn from those mistakes. If I don't address it when it needs addressed, I'm gonna have problems. And there was I got some. I feel like I'm just complaining a lot today on the podcast, but I was I remember when I first started making videos. Like, the first video I ever made, I was super proud of it. I was like, this is amazing. I did a really good job, And then, like, 2 months later, I watched that video and I'm like, that was horrible. Like, I spent like 4 minutes in footage just showing myself driving to FedEx and back. Like, that's really boring to watch. Why didn't I do that? Like, that's ridiculous. But even at 6 months, every video I put out, I'm like, this is my best video ever. I'm really proud of this video. And then 6 months later, I look back at it. I'm like, that video is crap too. Like, so it's kind of cool, like, being really excited in the moment, and like you were kind of tying that tarantula keeping. I would get really excited about a species that I got in the mail, and I'm setting up. I'm like, oh, I got a perfect enclosure for it. Everything is great. I'm keeping it really well. And then 6 months later, I kind of look back and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't the best enclosure for it, or that isn't the coolest species I could have gotten. It's what I think is really good in the moment. I got to keep in mind at that moment, like 6 months from now, you might have to change what you're doing, because that might not be the best knowledge anymore. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people, is to adapt and grow.
Yeah, it is hard, but it's also okay. Like, that means whether it happens every 6 months or every month or every year, that means that you've gone through some sort of substantial growth to where you're constantly learning and getting better. So that's great. And yeah, it is very frustrating, but if you haven't started somewhere, you have nowhere to go up. So like you have to respect that you weren't as good as you wanted to be or where you needed to be at a certain time. And you kept putting in that work. I do think it's the same thing with like videos, tarantula keeping, any type of thing that you're really invested in and you continually put in time and effort and energy to learn. Like we should be dissatisfied with the enclosures or the setups that we did in the first part of our journey. And we should also be able to accept advice of others. That's something that I think we're kind of getting at is in like sometimes in this gatekeeping tarantula world, I think sometimes the more experienced tarantula owners won't really accept the observations of more beginning tarantula owners and not really even willing to like think about things differently, because there's this almost this feeling of like, well, I've been at this for so many years, I've kept this many tarantulas. What could you possibly tell me that I don't already know? And sometimes that's true, but like we're all still learning. And maybe this tarantula owner had a very uncommon thing happen to them. And we can all learn from it anyway. Like there are multiple ways to get something done, which you were kind of getting at with your talk about, care requirements and enclosures and things like that. I think we also have to respect that different things also work for different people. We have to also respect who we are as people and what kind of tarantula owner we're going to be. Like for you, you have the capability to take care of tons of tarantulas that, and you're really good at it. I have 2 tarantulas because that's not me. And I don't think that I'm the type of tarantula owner that would enjoy that. So we have to respect. And I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure to, especially for new ones, to constantly have a huge collection of tarantulas because that's just what we do. That it's okay. Like you've got to find a schedule or a setup that works for you and your personality and your life situation and where you live in the world. You've got to find what works for you. And so I wish that there was a lot of just less judgment in this hobby for people who are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, one thing I've learned in life that applies to the hobby is that, somebody that's been keeping tarantulas for 60 days has a lot to teach somebody that just got their first tarantula. Like they don't know everything, but they know more than the person that just walked in their house with one. And, somebody with 5 years that can teach somebody with 1 year. But it also kind of works the other way too. Like if you've been keeping tarantulas for 20 years, you're pretty set in your ways. And there's a lot you can learn from somebody that's only been keeping for 6 months or a year, because they have probably read the most up-to-date information and have access to, the newest enclosures and stuff like that. They have more experience with things that maybe you don't. But I don't think like timekeeping makes you, it of course, more than other people because you have more experience, but it doesn't mean you can't learn from those people. All it really does is mean you have the ability to discern good advice and bad advice a lot better than somebody that has been keeping less than you. And I think it's something that I myself forget sometimes, and I have to remind myself, but I think it's this true with a lot of people. You get up there like, I've been keeping so long, there's nothing you can tell me. Like I'm right, you're wrong. Just, it's like, that's not always the case. Sometimes my 11-year-old son teaches me things that so that's just life. I agree with you as well as about the keeping, because I think something I see a lot is like, I have a lot of tarantulas, but I didn't get 150 tarantulas overnight. It wasn't something that took place. It accumulated over time. And I think that there's a lot of people out there, especially publicly, like public facing people that have a lot of tarantulas. And so you get into the hobby and you kind of think that's how it's supposed to be. Like, if I'm going to be a real tarantula keeper, I need 50 tarantulas on my shelf. So it's something I worry about a lot, is that I give people the impression that, you're not going to be respected unless you have a whole lot of tarantulas like me. And that's not the case at all. And it is sometimes disturbing to see somebody get their first tarantula, post a picture of it on Facebook, and then like 6 months later, you see them talking about getting their 50th tarantula, and they have like a whole wall of them. And I'm like, whoa, like that you haven't really spent enough time developing the husbandry and schedule that you would need for a couple of tarantulas. Like, um, and then before you know it, there's people out there with like 500-600 tarantulas, and they're starting a business and they're breeding, and it's just like, oh man, like I hope this works out for you, but I'm concerned about you and your tarantulas because I know how stressful it can be to have just the amount that I have, and can sometimes almost be a little overwhelming trying to, have a life outside of keeping tarantulas, have a job, and still take care of everybody, where they need to be. So it's something I try to warn people about. But in my experience or opinion, I think, and this is something that I was kind of excited to have you on the podcast about, because your day job, you're also a therapist. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes,
Okay. So there's a lot of mental health issues in the hobby. Like I know there's a lot of mental health issues like all over the world, especially in the US, but just, from having a Facebook group and Instagram and interacting with people, there's a lot of people I talk to that have PTSD, addiction, issues with depression, anxiety, bipolar, like it seems everybody is struggling with something. And I think that there's something about having some kind of mental health issue that possibly draws people to keeping tarantulas, whether it's like trying to love something that's unlovable or whatever the psychological reason is. It feels like there's a higher percentage of people dealing with mental health problems in our hobby than there are in other aspects of life. And I know there's a lot of people that are struggling with addiction, for instance, and that's something like I struggled with a lot throughout my life. Whether it was drinking, drugs, whatever it was, like if you could be addicted to it between my late 18, like between like 20s and 30s, I was addicted to it at some point and with horrendous consequences. And that is something I have to keep in check, with my own collection. I had some friends call me out like, dude, you were addicted to drugs. Now you're addicted to tarantulas. Like you need to calm down. It's getting unmanageable. So I have to like really kind of keep a track on like the manageability of it. That's why I've like had to stop ordering tarantulas. I was like, I'm not buying anymore because I feel like if I add more to my collection, that's going to create a higher level of stress and it's going to make everything a lot worse in life. But I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And it's not something I really ever hear anybody talk about, is like the addictive nature of tarantula keeping, or using tarantulas to kind of fill some kind of void inside. Or I just thought you might have an interesting kind of take on that. Or, I mean, is that something you've noticed at all?
Yes. Well, this might be long because this is like my favorite thing to talk about is tarantulas and therapy. So you got my two favorite things in awesome. the same conversation. Well, maybe it might be interesting for me to talk about how I got into tarantulas because it kind of ties into the mental health aspect. So I got a tarantula because I was going through a breakup many years ago. And I was so sad, right? And, looking back on it, I don't really know why I was so sad. But, in the moment, it was really, really hard. And I was not in therapy at that time. I'd never been in therapy as an adult. So I recognized that I need to take a break from dating. I need to figure myself out. But I was able to at least have the insight and realization. I was in my early 20s when this happened, that I have a pattern of jumping into relationships to distract myself from pain, from emotional pain. So I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. I need to. And I don't have an addictive personality as far as substances, or I'm not somebody who will, I partied a little bit, but my real thing was like, I guess I had a love addiction or whatever you would call that, is that I really like to be. Yeah, exactly. Just like that. I was just going to say that. Yeah. Or I need something to distract me that's outside of myself, to take away this pain. So I was like, well, I need to take care of something that's not a person, because this is an unhealthy pattern that I've gotten. So, I got a tarantula. I really wanted a cat. So I also have a cat as well as my two tarantulas, and my cat wasn't living at me at this time because I was raised in New York. I moved to Philly for college and I couldn't take my cat with me to the dorms. And at the time I was out of college, but I had a roommate who was very allergic to cats. So I couldn't take my cat from my family's house in New York and bring her to Philly just yet. So the cat was out, that was out of the question. So I was like, okay, I need a low maintenance pet. If we're talking about mental health, things like depression and anxiety are things that I struggle with even to this day. And I very much struggled a lot more back then too. And so I was like, I need a low maintenance pet, something that doesn't really take so much from me, which is why a cat was perfect, because and cat is a kind of an animal where you just kind of give them a litter box and food and water, and then they're okay. They don't need you to clean their cage every week or so. So I was like, well, I've always kind of been interested in spiders. And so I started doing some research on tarantulas, and I decided that would be the perfect pet. And so I got one, and it was actually the perfect solution to my my emotional issue at that point in going through a breakup depression, because I just fell in love with her. And she allowed me to take care of something and learn about something in a way that was it was a much more healthy solution than me, looking for my next boyfriend or whatever it was, so it was something that was really good. And I've noticed that with a lot of people in looking at tarantula groups and things like that, is that a lot of people will talk about how tarantulas have gotten them out of a deep depression, or helped them with anxiety, or have helped them handle an addiction. Whether they have, this issue with tarantulas, and that the addiction just becomes healthier because they're not using substances, they're taking care of tarantulas, or if it's just that they really found something that they love and they love learning about it. And many people find tarantulas soothing. I know that people who are scared of spiders would not think that, but for some people, watching tarantulas move is very trance-like. It kind of gives you like this, it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit meditative. And I've also experienced quite a bit of mental ease so I used to hold my Chilean rose hair a lot in my beginning tarantula journey. I don't do it anymore because that's just not my belief as a tarantula owner, that these things should be held. But I used to do that a lot. And during my first year with her, that was the first time I received mental calm and clarity, was when I was holding her, because it's an activity that takes so much mental focus if you're doing it well and safely, is that literally nothing else can be in your mind besides the tarantula and focusing on every move it makes. Because if you're not focused, you're going to make a terrible mistake, or you're going to get bitten, or your spider's going to fall. So that was like, I've never really reached that amount of mental silence and escape from my anxiety than when I was holding her, because I had to be that heavily focused. So I would say my tarantulas have definitely helped me with anxiety, as well as depression, and giving me a lot of really great insight into myself. I've also really thought about it as far as, so in therapy, we talk about love languages. It's also helped me also in my personal relationships, because you have to respect the creature, just like you have to respect people. So there's a few different love languages. One's physical touch, gift giving, acts of service, words of affirmation, and physical. I think I already said that, but there's a few different ones. And tarantulas don't have the love language of physical touch. Physical touch is one of my love languages. So I might want to hold my spider, but I need to respect her. She doesn't want to be held. She'll be really stressed out if I hold her. So I need to respect her the same way we need to respect people in our lives. Like, not everybody enjoys tons of physical touch, and not everybody enjoys talking all the time, or, we just always have to respect the animal and the people in our lives. So it's helped me kind of gain insight into my relationships, and thinking about how I express love and how I communicate. It's also given me the experience of being able to take care of something and not expect something in return. And I think that's a really important point in tarantula keeping, is that we do it because we really care about these animals and we really love them. And even though we gain enjoyment from watching them and seeing them on display and stuff, this is not a creature that can love you back as far as we know. And so being able to learn how to take care of something just because you really enjoy it, not because it's going to say thank you or, love you back. I think that's a good lesson, a good life lesson.
Yeah. And it's not so much that it's like a selfless act, because I do get some enjoyment out of keeping them. So I can't say it's selfless, but there definitely isn't reciprocation. That is for sure. At least not. And I talked about this actually in one of my last podcasts, the Zen of tarantula keeping, just how that's one of the lessons. And I even like I got that idea from watching your video on the love languages of tarantulas. I was like, she's very right. Because there is no way for me to, like, how I want to show love to my tarantula is definitely not how it wants to receive it, that's very applicable in a lot of ways in life, I think that's serious issues in relationships come from that. Like I expect, I show my wife how I love her by the way I want her to show me that she loves me and vice versa. And if you're not on the same page and you don't have good communication to kind of, rectify that situation and explain how it is you want to receive love, and I can explain how I want to receive love, then that causes some issues moving forward. So it's one of those things that you kind of learn life lessons from keeping tarantulas, I guess.
So many.
There was somebody I was talking to, I'm not going to put their name. There's like a few different people, actually. I've had this conversation multiple times with people that, they were addicted to drugs for many years and they got clean. And for whatever reason, they were drawn to keeping a tarantula. And they kind of saw that addictive, obsessive, compulsive type of personality take over in this area, because there is that shopping for a tarantula online. There's plenty of scientific studies showing online shopping has endorphin releases in the brain. So it feels good, like just looking at species and put them in your cart, click and buy. And then there's also another endorphin rush when you're actually getting them in the mail and you're unboxing them and checking them out and building their enclosures and putting them up. And then now you've got them in their enclosure, everything's done. That endorphin rush kind of fades away. And now you're stuck with like, not so much guilt, but like the realization that I just spent the money I should have spent on the electric bill on tarantulas. And now I have this guilt and this depression and this frustration, and I'm irresponsible. And, now I don't have that enjoyment so much because now the tarantula's dug in its burrow and I can't even see it. And, and then all those feelings just start piling up. You just start feeling like shit. And if you have a history of addictive personality, the cure for that is usually what's going to bring me an endorphin rush. So then I go back online, I start shopping for more tarantulas, and I buy, and it's this cycle that goes. And before you know it, you've got 100 tarantulas, and you're behind on your bills, and you can't take care of them as well as you should be able to. And it's not something you can really call somebody out on. I can't be like, hey man, I think you're getting out of hand here, because how can you, what I mean? Like somebody can't realize they're an addict unless they acknowledge it, So, and I don't know their situation, but I think it's something that really should at least be discussed sometimes and talked about, that, the keeping tarantulas is cool, and having a lot of tarantulas can be very rewarding. And I completely understand that, but there's also a downside to it that, whether you're trying to replace somebody that passed away, or, you're just kind of filling that void, that maybe left from a drug addiction or whatever it is, you got to be responsible, and there needs to be some kind of accountability or some way for people to, acknowledge or kind of call out behavior that could be self-destructive.
Absolutely. I think the self-destructive part of what you're saying is really what we need to look at. And like, first of all, like being able to acknowledge, like, you have great friends who will actually check you, right? Being able to have people in our lives that check us. If we're buying too many clothes or too many things on Amazon, and we're also complaining about money at the same time, being able to have people in our lives that are honest and loving enough to be like, hey, you might want to pay attention to this because you've been buying a lot of stuff, and you were also just saying yesterday that or last week that you were broke, or you're worried about money. So being able to have supportive people in our lives, and also like the way that in the mental health field that we not only diagnose mental illnesses, but also look at addiction is, what is this doing to the person's life? So, if you've got tarantulas and you're still able to work, be productive, have relationships in your life, be financially okay, maybe it's not such a big issue and you still have other hobbies and things and so your life looks very full. However, if you are in financial distress and your work can't support the hobby that you're getting into, and if you are now isolating because you're so consumed with spending time on the internet looking up tarantula stuff, and if you're neglecting your health because you're either online shopping too much or you're isolating and you're not showering and doing those basic needs, then we start to look at like, okay, this is actually causing some sort of self-destruction, and so this is something that we need to look at. Even if you've now amassed a collection that you can actually take care of while taking care of yourself, those are all things that we need to look at. And we can really look at it like, yes, keeping tarantulas or taking care of animals is in some aspects healthier than you drinking a lot of alcohol as far as your physical health. But I think a lot of people don't know what this does to you financially. There are definitely very expensive, having a dog or a cat with medical issues is very expensive. But so can tarantula keeping. Like, I first got into the hobby with my one tarantula because I thought it was going to be a really cheap pet. And she is, because she was already fully grown. So she's in the same enclosure that I first got her in, and she's been in there for 7 years. But if you've got all these tiny little tarantulas and you just got 50, those little deli cups are going to work for a little while, but you're going to have to buy 50 enclosures if in a few years. So I hope that you're planning for that. And these tarantulas are going to need food every single week, and you're going to have to buy like 20 pounds of substrate, or like, I don't know what you're going to have to do, but really thinking about the investment. And not only that, but like, I feel like sometimes if you really are in that, of like really wanting to get into the exotic species, that is a big investment. So, we want to think about trying to do that in a healthy way to where it's enriching your life instead of causing a level of destruction.
I talked about that in a video. I don't remember which one it was, but it was about people like buying a lot of spiderlings, and that you can put 10, 15 spiderlings on a shelf in your house, but soon those are all going to be 6 to 9 inch spiders that are going to need 10-gallon enclosures, and that now you need shelves. And the biggest cost, I think, that myself and I think a lot of people don't think about, especially when they're amassing a large collection, is like space. Like, that's expensive. So, I mean, you're in a 1-bedroom apartment, you may all of a sudden need to get a 2-bedroom apartment just so you have room for all your enclosures. Luckily I have a basement that I could kind of do that in, but I was very similar to, I would only have like 1 or 2 tarantulas at a time for many, many years. And I was lucky enough to have somebody in my life that kind of called me out on it. But like, it was after my father had passed away, or it was before he had passed away, but he was like really sick. And it was he was 4 hours away, and would get a phone call from my mom saying, like, this is the day you need to come down and say goodbye. And I'd drive down there and we'd be there for the weekend and talking to him. And then he'd pull out of it and be okay. And then it's like, all right, near miss, come back home. A couple weeks later, doctors are saying he's not going to live another 48 hours. So then we could drive back down there. It was just back and forth kind of, it was emotionally straining. And at the time I had only had, like, it had been maybe a year or something that I hadn't been using drugs and alcohol. So like, I wasn't in the best place emotionally and mentally at that moment. And I've kind of found some solace in getting tarantula. Like, it was also about that same time I realized you could buy tarantulas online. You know what I mean? It was like this culmination of all this stuff happened at once. And I was like, I'm getting 10 tarantulas, or I started with like 2, and then it was like, okay, next order is 10. And then the next month and I had a friend that was like, a couple of friends actually, and my wife that were like, I think that you're using tarantulas here to kind of not deal with how you're actually feeling or what's going on in life. And, I'm lucky that I had somebody like that in my life. And when I see somebody out there that's going through something similar, I always try and relate to them and tell my story or something like that. But there's a lot of it going on that I don't think that we're aware of. And and it's not, I'm not saying it's always drugs and alcohol, but I mean, like you were mentioned, sometimes you're getting out of a bad relationship or you lost your job or, something. Yeah, it's bad things happen, and it's really easy to use tarantulas and not just tarantulas. I mean, scorpions, snakes. There's a lot of different exotic pets, or so many other things that we could use. But I'm just very attuned to it in this hobby because it seems like it's something that happens a lot. People that are dealing with very stressful situations, and it sucks seeing the entire cycle where somebody's amassing this large collection and are a self-proclaimed expert and are just super obsessed about it, and then the next year they're trying to sell off their entire collection because they're like over it, they're overwhelmed or they're frustrated or whatever it is. And it's just bad all around. Bad for the tarantulas, it's bad for your mental health, it's bad for the hobby. It sucks seeing it's my who was it, my grandmother all the time used to say what starts as what starts as a fire burns up in the flame or something like that. So when I see somebody get like super excited really fast, it's like, oh no, like you're gonna burn out real quick, man. Take your time. This is a journey, but it's something that I'm just really sensitive to because I lived it. I went through it. I had to, in a lot of ways, kind of turn that negative into a positive. Like that's part of the, like, what am I going to do with all these tarantulas now? Like I have them, I'm taking care of them, I enjoy them. But I need to somehow grow from this experience. And it started with like, I'll just take pictures of them and share them online. That's some way I can share my love with other people and meet other people like me. And that's just kind of grown into, well, now we have a podcast and you know what I mean? Like I didn't think it would go this route.
Yeah, what you did. And I think that's such a beautiful message as far as resilience and being able to turn a very negative experience. I think grief is one of those big triggers, whether it's like you said, loss of job, relationship, loss of a loved one. Being able to turn that into something, and even if we've gone a little bit overboard in one direction of our lives, being able to be like, okay, how can I actually make this really positive? And I think that I want to return back to mental health a little bit in a second, but what I have seen a lot, and this also does go along with mental health, is that the tarantula hobby and community can also be a beautiful, amazing place to find connection. I've met so many amazing people like yourself, so many, whether it's through Facebook groups, YouTube, people that are like subscribers to my newsletter. There's so many wonderful people. And for a lot of people, if we're talking about mental health, I think something that goes along with the tarantula hobby is neuroticism. So if we're talking about that, that is usually a factor in anxiety and depression, which a lot of tarantula owners say that tarantulas help them with. I think you've got to be, to some degree, a little bit neurotic in your personality if you are somebody who can take care of a lot of tarantulas, or even just one, like making sure that their tank is meticulous and they're healthy, not stressed out, all of that stuff. I think that tarantula owners, many of them do have that part of their personality. And when we're a little bit neurotic, we might also be a little bit isolated or feel alone. Perhaps you're struggling with depression. And so maybe the tarantula hobby and community as a whole provides a space for us that the rest of the world doesn't really make room for. I honestly love talking to like people who are not tarantula owners about tarantulas, because I always find that people get super fascinated and they're super curious. But I think that's because there's not really a lot of space for us to talk about our hobby besides in tarantula groups. This is not a pet that people really love or are going to ask readily about it and have a positive reaction to it. So I think that it does provide a lot of things that we need for our mental health, whether it's community, connection, a place for us, a healthier outlet for like anxiety and things like that, something that's soothing, but also provides less isolation for us. It's a place where we can really connect with people.
Yeah, I think the community in the tarantula hobby is really good. There's trolls and stuff like that, but just starting a Facebook group, I was able to meet a lot of really cool people. And it's dealers, breeders, other hobbyists. Like it's it's like a whole community that I didn't even know existed. And years, decades of having a tarantula, I didn't realize there was, something out there that was, such a strong community. And it's exciting to watch it grow so much, especially the past few years. It really seems like it's been expanding. There's so many new Facebook groups, like so many, I can't even keep up with them. It's like, it's like every week I'm getting invited to another tarantula or scorpion Facebook group. And, I wish I could be active in all of them, but that's, who's got that kind of time. But it's nice seeing there's so many small little cliques, not the right word, but like small little communities within the community that are forming, that are people that just care or want to discuss one particular species or, one aspect of the hobby, like whether it's just building enclosures or just bioactives or just Balfouri tarantulas or just communal species. You can find whatever it is you're looking for, it seems, which I don't think was something that was available 10 years ago, but for sure. But so what would you, okay, I have really bad health insurance, so I'm just using you as my therapy session this week. Well, definitely, I'm gonna have to bring you back on the podcast regularly, just so I get some free therapy. But what would be a good suggestion for someone that finds themselves overwhelmed by the amount of tarantulas that they are keeping? Like they went too hard, too fast, or what's the best way to move forward in that situation?
I feel like I can't really speak from experience because I have two tarantulas. And so I have no idea how overwhelming, I think that, if we're thinking of just on an organizational system level, trying to find, like, group your tarantulas as far as like similar needs. I'm thinking about like, if someone has a setup like yours, I'm sure that you have certain, tarantulas that have certain lighting requirements or whatever, or certain types of enclosures, you organize them that way. Maybe even thinking about tarantulas, clustering them as far as age. So they might have similar feeding schedules, like trying to look at your collection as a system. Definitely something that I do in therapy all the time that I think is so useful, even in my personal life, is like writing things down and actually having a schedule. I think that's the easiest thing to do. And then like, if we're thinking about like the 80-20 rule, like where 20% of your collection might be causing you 80% of your stress. So maybe if you can't take care of all of them, maybe that tarantula that has all that is taking all of that care stuff, maybe that's the one to either give to a friend or try to find a good home for, or find a better way around that. Like kind of thinking about what is the most stressful part of this experience, and thinking about how could you plan a little bit better, how could you make it work with your life a little bit better. And also like talking to people like yourself who have huge collections, like how do you sustain this? How do you sustain it financially? Do you buy in bulk? How do you repurpose things around your house to be enclosures? Like trying to find ways to make that work financially and also time-wise, effort-wise, really taking a look at your energy needs. I know that I am somebody who does not have the energy for tons of tarantulas. So I don't do it. So thinking about who you are as a person, whether you're somebody who would be okay with a small collection, like you don't have to have a huge collection if you don't want to. If you want to, that's wonderful too, but you've got to be able to take care of all of them, because then it's not life-giving, it's taking away from you. It's making it really hard for you to live your life if we can't find a way to sustain this over time. Because you're not just taking that care of them for 1 week. Like this is something you will have to do for years. And people like yourself are really good at it, but I know that I might not be. So I just try to respect my own ability to put energy into only my tarantulas, as well as what the rest of my life looks like. Knowing that I work in mental health. Sometimes I don't have tons of other energy for other things, because I have to take care of myself too. So I have to do things like yoga. I have to have other hobbies that also sustain me and reduce stress. So thinking about like, what are some other things in people's lives that they can do to reduce anxiety too and be more balanced? Sometimes if we're focusing too hard on one aspect, it can be kind of hard. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I think it's something important that you touched on, was just kind of identifying your own limitations. I think it's something that maybe a lot of us don't like to look at, I guess. Just kind of determine your strengths and weaknesses and knowing what's too much. And sometimes it's hard when you're keeping tarantulas because it's not too much at first. I got little spiderlings. It's not that big of a deal. I forget, or I don't know. You don't think about the future. Like, well, what is this going to look like in 10 years or in 20 years? I think it amazes some people. They hear that a tarantula lives 20 or 30 years. Like, that's a long time, but it's also just a number that you hear or you read on a sheet of paper, and you don't actually do the math. And like, well, I'm 30 now, so I'll be 60 if this is a mature, like when this is a female that may die. Like, am I really ready to bring on keep a pet for the next 30 years of my life potentially, let alone 100? And that's one of the things I like about tarantulas is that you don't have to get one that lives 30 years. You can get one that lives 10 years or 8 years. You get an adult that's already halfway through its life cycle. There's a lot of different options out there available to you. But there's also this kind of desire to get it as cheap and as fast as possible. And a lot of times that means you're getting a spiderling. You might have to wait a few years to find somebody that puts a adult female up for sale, the species you want, and it's probably going to be very expensive. So there's that kind of like instant gratification. I want it and I want it now, and I'm not going to think about the consequences or the future, what it's all going to entail, because I want to feel good right now. And it's I don't know, I think it's one of those things that needs to be taken into consideration before getting tarantulas. It's not just how am I going to take care of it, but what am I going to be doing in 10 years? Will I still be able to have a huge tarantula collection? Like 10 years ago, there's no way I could have the collection I have right now. I was transient, moving around every year, like going all over the country. Like, it would be impossible to do that. Like, now I have a mortgage and a house, and I know I'm not going anywhere for quite a while. So I feel a little more comfortable in building a large collection, but I would not feel comfortable in an apartment. I don't think a landlord would be very cool with me having 100 tarantulas in his apartment building. And it's just, it's one of those things that I never really hear anybody talking about. You don't see anybody warning about, until it's too late. It's kind of like, well, why did you do that? That was a dumb thing to do. It's like, well, we're humans. We make mistakes, and we kind of get caught up in our own thoughts.
Yeah. I've certainly gone into certain hobbies. It didn't really happen with tarantulas, I think, because I still am very intimidated by the thought of having a huge collection. But there's hobbies that I've had that I've really gone like deep in 150%. And I was like, okay, I gotta pull back. That was a little bit much. We all do that when we're excited. Yeah. So I think it's also like being able to be okay. Like, it's okay if I don't have a huge collection, I can still be a good tarantula owner. Knowing that the size of your collection and the type of species you get is not the only way to measure yourself in the hobby. I feel like despite my small collection, I actually have a lot of knowledge to share with people. And I wish that more people knew that, is that you can still be confident in what you're doing and feel like you have things to add to the hobby, even if you don't have a lot of tarantulas. I think that there is this big pressure, as you were saying, to expand really, really quickly. I get asked quite a bit, why don't I have a more, dangerous tarantula, or why don't I have more tarantulas? But it's just not something that I'm feeling at the moment, or something I have an interest in right now. So I just respect that. And I think that we all need to respect what we can do, and not feel pressure. Do it because we want to, and not because we feel the pressure that we're not good enough, or something like that. But I'd love to ask you, because I'm always so curious about how people who have huge collections take care of them. So do you have like a specific day that you dedicate to your tarantulas, or like maybe the viewers would be really interested in learning about like, how does that actually work? Because your setup's so amazing.
Yeah, I do have a schedule. For a long time, I was using an app, the Exotic Keeper app, that kind of broke down, what species it was. I could put in when it molted, when I fed it, stuff like that. But then it got to the point where it was, that was very time consuming. Like, just having to go in on each one and put in, okay, I just fed this one. So I kind of turned it more into a shelf. Like I got all these different shelves behind me. I look at like, okay, I'm going to feed this wall on Tuesdays, and I'm going to feed this wall on Thursdays, and I kind of break it up like that. I feed my snakes on Sundays and scorpions on Sundays, and I keep in mind that or at least make note, like if something comes up and I'm not able to do that day, okay, I got to do that the next day. You can't just skip it. You gotta, if I put something off today, that means I got to do it tomorrow for sure. And I have to like keep that in mind. Like I don't want to do that because stuff starts piling up really quickly, especially when I also got to shoot videos and edit videos and keep updated with the website and all that other stuff. It's like, I have to break it all up on a schedule. And one of the nice things is recently I was able to cut back at work from working, 5 9-hour days down to like 3 9-hour days. So that gives me 2 days to kind of focus on, taking care of what I need to take care of here. And I've only been able to do that because just have so many supportive people that have like become members on Patreon or on YouTube that have been able to kind of supplement some of the expenses of just, because like you mentioned earlier, camera equipment is expensive and lights are expensive, and not even talking about the tarantulas and the enclosures, just the stuff to make videos and do podcasts, and it's a whole bunch of small expenses that add up, but it's also some really really large. I mean, just getting a computer that can edit 4K video is thousands of dollars, and I'm not a computer guy, so I can't like build my own yet. But it's that budgeting my time and my money is like the only way I can really do that, and kind of setting up some kind of plan. And it's one of those things that it's taught me a lot of self-discipline. Like it's something I lacked a lot in life is like being motivated and self-disciplined. But I didn't have a choice. It's one of the potentially negative effects of growing a large tarantula collection that's turned into a positive, because it forced me to kind of have that self-discipline that I probably needed through my 20s that I did not have.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to ask, because you do have a system that works for you, and you do kind of structure your setup in a way that makes it easier for you. That's something that I think would be really useful for people who have a big collection, is really thinking about getting organized and making a system for yourself. And I think it can be really hard because, I'm just thinking about you trying to shoot your videos, and you might have, also having some flexibility too, and being able to roll with the punches, because you might want to shoot this one spider, but all of a sudden it's molting on the day that you have to shoot it. So you just don't know what's going to happen. There is a certain level of unpredictability. Like we try to plan as well as we can, but we still have to. This is a live animal, and it has its own ideas, and so we've got to also be a little bit flexible. But I think if we're talking about collection size and mental health, one of the things that people have said tarantulas are really wonderful for is that, particularly if you have a small collection, if you are struggling with depression, you may not have energy to make yourself food. Like I'm talking about like severe clinical depression. You might not be able to shower. You might not be able to do a lot of things. So being able to have a pet that is that low maintenance, in that maybe you only have to feed it twice a week. Maybe you only have to clean its cage every few months, besides some like spot cleaning. I think that's what makes tarantulas really attractive. So I think if we're thinking about our own energetic and mental health needs, being able to find a way to work with our mental health. So if you are struggling with something like bipolar disorder, and that sometimes you have a lot of energy and can be very productive, but then also there might be a week or two where you're just in bed and you can't do anything else. So being able to take advantage of those times to be like, okay, I've got a large collection. I know right now I'm feeling okay. I have to I have to feed them this week. I have to change the tanks this week. Being able to really think about how we work that into our lives. Also, if we're going through a depression, maybe now is not the time to get tons of tarantulas, because it's going to take a lot of energy from us. So and it works differently for different people. I've heard a lot of people say that maybe they can't take care of themselves, but they can take care of their pets. For many of them, that's the kind of thing that relieves them. So really, I mean, mental health affects all of us differently, and different things work for different people. So it's really like, really reflecting on what works for me and respecting that, and not trying to, live up to what other people are doing, because they might have totally different, personalities, lifestyles, things that make things easier for them. So you just got to be sensitive to what works for us.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. A lot of people who have high stress levels or anxiety, and they find tarantulas are calming, or people who have struggle with depression, but they can find some solace and happiness and motivation in their tarantulas. And there's a lot of, there's even people that I think it's Tanya at Fear Not Tarantulas takes some tarantulas maybe once a month or something like that to a school for mentally disabled people. And like, I'm not sure if it's autism or what, maybe it's like a wide range of stuff, but they find them very calming. And, it's fascinating that something that is stereotypically a scary spider actually can have some very positive mental health benefits. I mean, I know I've discussed it on the podcast and in videos a lot, that it's like, taking care of my tarantulas is like one of my favorite forms of meditation, like where I can just be with myself and my thoughts and present in the moment. And it's so many, there's also some kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like this positive feeling from taking care of something that a lot of people are scared of, or hate, because they don't know any better. I really enjoy that, especially some of the species that are endangered. It's like, it's kind of nice knowing that, I'm part of this. And I really respect what you do, like with your books and your magazine and your YouTube channel. Something you touched on earlier is I think it's really important to talk about and to have out there, is that you don't have to have 100 tarantulas to be a respected tarantula keeper, or be a keeper at all. Like, there's nothing wrong with having one tarantula or 10 tarantulas or 5. It's whatever you're comfortable with. And I think that it's so easy for people to look at like the dark den and be like, I have to have a collection like that to be a real tarantula keeper or a real exotic pet keeper. And it's like, no, you don't, like that should be the exception, not the rule. Like, I kept one tarantula for 15 years and was completely happy with just that one in my collection. There's a lot of fulfillment and enjoyment that can come out of that. And, just because there's hundreds of species to choose from doesn't mean you have to have all of them. Like, it just means you have a wide variety of species to pick from. And I also think that it's important for there to be some public figures that don't have old world tarantulas in their enclosure, so people don't feel like that is some kind of badge of honor or something. It's like, I didn't keep an old world tarantula until very recently. It was kind of like, it slowly crept in on me. I got one as a freebie and was like, oh man, like I did not want an old world. And then I had such a good experience with it. I started relaxing that rule and trying more, but they're not for everybody. Not everybody wants a venomous fast tarantula. And I don't think that makes you less of a keeper. In fact, I think it makes you a better keeper, because you know your own limitations. You know what you're comfortable with, and you're standing by that, not kind of falling into the pressure of other people in the community saying you have to have one. Or and I get like, man, that's like the most common requests I get for videos is like, cover the HMAC. And it's like, I really don't want to do that, because in my collection, at least, that's like the flightiest tarantula I have. It's, it's just very defensive and very fast. And it's a lot of like, to get good footage of it, I have to take it out of its enclosure, which means I'm exposing, and I have to get close to it with a camera. And I'm cool doing it with new worlds, and some of the old worlds I'm comfortable with. That one I'm not comfortable with. And maybe at some point in the future I will be, and I can do a video. Or what I'm doing right now is just very slowly over time, when the opportunity presents itself to get some footage, I'll take some footage, but I may only get like 60 seconds or 20 seconds worth of footage. But over a year, if I keep doing that, eventually I'll have enough footage to put a video out on it. And that's kind of how I approach those. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration when they're like, hey, make the video on this species. It's like to do one species specific video, I film like 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours of the tarantula that I have to cut down, because they don't take commands at all. Like I have yet been able to train my tarantula. So a lot of it, like I have hundreds, if not thousands of hours of footage of tarantulas standing still. Like, just like, I'm not going to move, like last night, my G pulchripes was molt, like it flipped over on its back and was about to molt. And I'm like, awesome. So I set up 2 cameras, 2 beautiful angles, lit it really well, put it on time lapse infinite. So I was like, this is going to record until the memory card is full. And I was like, it's not going to do it till I leave the room, because that's just kind of how my tarantulas are. I can watch them molt for hours and then they won't do anything until I walk out of the room, and then they'll pull out of it real quick. So I go upstairs, I end up watching TV with my wife, and we go to bed. I wake up in the morning, I run down here, I grab the footage, I put the card in my computer, and I'm like scrubbing through it. 5 hours of footage of that guy laying on his back. The last like 20 seconds of the time lapse, you could see it just starting to like pull out, and then it cuts off. So I missed the entire molt on 2 cameras. I'm like, geez, that's like the second time that's happened, So it's a lot of time and effort and work goes into getting some of these shots.
I love that you're talking about this, because people really have no idea. I mean, people who are familiar with tarantulas, they probably will know that in keeping them that, like for example, my tarantula, I've been trying to get a really good grooming video of her so that I could use it in a video to teach people. And it is so frustrating because she'll do it for like a few seconds, then she'll stop for like 5 minutes and be totally still. And like, that's just so common. So I'm like, I would really have to sit here for an hour just to get like 2 minutes of her in action. And it's really hard. And, I do think that you're right in that people don't think about the amount of investment that you have taken in putting up all those cameras, but also having faith that the tarantula is going to do hopefully something interesting during that span of time. And like that, there's also a lot of risk that you take for yourself in that, like when you're talking about, you're trying to film your more flighty tarantulas and the ones that actually might move during this. It takes a lot for you to really think about, is my camera going to be intrusive? Is it going to be threatening to the tarantula? I'm thinking about safety requirements too. I'm sure that when you set up your cameras, you're making sure that the camera is not going to fall into the tank or do anything like that, or that you're nearby. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. It's one of those things I have to find a balance as well too. Cause it's like, there's only so much you can do, to encourage a tarantula to do something. You know what I mean? Like I've learned over time that if I like try to push it a little bit with a brush or something like that, there's a point where it's just going to become annoyed and it's going to give me a threat pose. And it's like, once there's a threat pose, filming is over, because it's stressed out. One, I don't want to stress it out, but 2, like it's not going to do anything now. It's just going to stand there in a threat pose. It may calm down and walk a little bit, but first little breeze, it's going to go right back in that defensive posture. And it's not good. It's not good for the tarantula, and it's not safe for me because so usually once it gets to that point, it's like, all right, we'll put you up. We'll try again next week. I'll give you a few days to calm down. And, it's a long process, and sometimes it's not hard at all. Like the one I was the most worried about was the cobalt blue tarantula. And it just happened that it was like, came out of its burrow and was just kind of hanging out on top for the day. So I like moved it over to the table and put a cup on it and walked right in the cup. And, it was I was very lucky. It was just kind of in a chill mood. So I was able to like just film it for 3 or 4 hours to get some footage. But the same thing happened. Like I was like, you're too chill. Like you're just standing there, So I started like giving a little poke on the back legs with my tongs or something, and got it to walk a little bit, but then it turned around and slapped the ground, gave me a threat pose. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a couple pictures of this, and then I'm putting you back up because you will hurt, and I don't want to endanger the tarantula, because even like I got a very special table that's very low to the ground. So even if the tarantula were to run off the side of the table, it's not that far of a fall. which kills my back sometimes when because even sitting in a chair, I still gotta like lean over. But and it's nice because it also has cloth on the sides of it. So it's like if it does start to go down the side, it's really easy for it to kind of grab onto. So it's not just like a slot, it's like just slick surface that'll fall straight off. So I mean, I put a lot of time and effort and consideration into figuring out the best or safest possible way to film them. But if I want to get good, clear footage of them, I got to take them out of their enclosure, and that's a risky time. And I just want to encourage people that don't keep old worlds to not feel obligated to. I like to throw that out there. I don't know if that really ties in, but
no, I think it certainly does. And I love that you brought this up, because this is something that I also feel really passionate about. And I try to talk about on my channel is that and I'm probably very interested in it because I'm a therapist. And so, I look at behavior and things like that and the holistic health of an animal as well as people as something that's really great to discuss. But I love that you really think about in your videos. And I think, I love that you're a big channel that's talking about this, because so I don't watch too much of their videos, but I know that a lot of people have criticized a big channel like Exotic's Lair for his sometimes intrusive tarantula keeping style or filming style. I think The Dark Den is also another channel that I've heard about that with. And so I love that you really take into consideration what is going to be the way that I can film this animal that's going to bother it the least. What's going to be healthy for me and the tarantula. If the tarantula actually does get defensive, let me pay attention to their body language, and I'm going to stop if it's getting too much. I think that's really, really important, because I think that, especially on YouTube, people want to see interesting tarantula behavior, but also knowing that like a happy spider that's happy is actually a spider that's very calm and not doing much of anything. So,
Very true.
if you're trying to doing a whole lot and it's throwing up threat poses, that doesn't mean that it's actually in a good spot right now. So I love that you said that, and that you actually really do take into consideration, because I don't want there to be an environment in this hobby where, and there's been a lot of new tarantula YouTube channels coming on as the hobby grows. And I don't want, triggering your tarantulas to be something that people try to exploit for views, and because it's very dangerous for us and the spiders.
that's very true. And I try to take a lot of people's criticism of other channels with a grain of salt, just from my own perspective, because I know that all we really see of the Dark Den or Exotic Slayer or any of the others channel are what they edit and include in a video, so nobody can accurately judge how I keep my tarantulas based on my videos. Like, I get a lot of crap for Tong feeding. Like, sometimes if I'm in like a bad mood and I just want to like dwell and be in a bad mood, like that kind of self-fulfilling, like, I'm already crappy. Let's really feel crappy today. I'll go on Arachnoboards and search my name, because I know I'm guaranteed to. That's where my trolls are. That's where the people that hate me the most are. And then I just read the comments, and one of the biggest complaints that they have about me is that I Tong feed my tarantulas. Like, it's just ridiculous. He Tong feeds all of his tarantulas. It's just such a bad habit. And I'm like, if you think I Tong feed 150 tarantulas every week, you're freaking insane. Like, that is so time consuming. There is only one reason that I use tongs to feed a tarantula, and that is because I'm filming it with a macro lens. So there's a very, very thin field of view. If it's like 2 millimeters forward or backward, it's out of focus. So I need it to take that cricket right in that exact location. And the only way to get the cricket to be in that exact location is to hold it with tongs, So I'm holding it with the camera focus ring with one hand, the tong with the other, and not even looking so much as at the actual tarantula as I am the screen, to make sure it's all in focus, and then entice the tarantula. And sometimes it takes 20 minutes to get the tarantula to actually take the cricket where I want it. So I'm just sitting there on record, watching, holding, trying to tantalize it with moving the cricket a little bit. And half the time it doesn't even happen. They just turn around and walk away. And it's like, oh man, I had to erase all that, So I don't Tong feed my tarantulas, but it looks that way because the majority of feeding videos you see on my channel, I'm feeding them with tongs. And so people just assume that's how I do it all the time. And normally I open the enclosure and throw in the crickets and move on to the next one. Like, Sometimes I don't even have time to enjoy watching them feed. It's like, this is a chore I have to get done. I'll enjoy it next time, So when I know that's true about me, and I know what people say. So sometimes I'm like, when I see somebody complaining about something Dark Den's doing, I'm like, he did that in that video, but that's probably not the reality of the situation. There are channels that intentionally antagonize tarantulas just for the footage, and that I think is not good. It's reprehensible. In fact, I think that, like, I really like what you said. If a tarantula is giving me a threat pose, it's usually because I've upset it. I've done something wrong. It's not in a good place. I've mentioned that in my video about the orange baboon tarantula. It's so notorious for being a dangerous tarantula, or giving threat poses and slapping and just being insane. My experience has not been that, but it's because I don't antagonize it. I'm not in there poking it. I'm not Tong feeding it usually, unless I'm trying to record it on video. And I set it up in an enclosure that I think makes it feel a lot more comfortable, So if it has plenty of places it can run and hide, then there's no reason for it to give me a threat pose. Like, it's because it's just going to run and hide before it threatens me. So anytime I hear somebody talking about, my tarantula's been giving me all these threat poses, it's like, it's not so much an issue with the tarantula as it is probably an issue with your husbandry. Like, it doesn't feel comfortable in its enclosure, so it's just on edge all the time. So maybe you should address that and not, like, get rid of the tarantula, or at least try to address that. For sometimes you just got a grumpy tarantula. But
yeah, I love that. I love that you give that perspective of, like, what is that actually like as somebody who's trying to film a tarantula. That is something that I didn't even think about. So I love that knowledge. That's so interesting. But yeah, I think, like, we do have to think about, like, what is our behavior and what is the tarantula's environment doing to the tarantula? And also, like, what are your expectations of the tarantula? I think, like, rose hairs are one of those tarantulas that when I was first getting into the hobby, people were saying, like, yes, that is the beginner tarantula. Now that I've gained a little bit more experience and I've heard more opinions, a lot of people are like, no, because they're kind of unpredictable. Like, you could have a really moody rose hair and it's not going to be anything like what you hoped it would be. And also, like, what I've experienced with mine is that she was super sweet and calm and chill for like 5 years. And then she had this one molt. And then for like a year, I was scared of her. Like, so, like, your tarantulas will change too, depending on, or they might go through different moods, whether they're in their hibernation winter phase or what's going on. So, like, what do you actually expect from this tarantula? Not only just from their species, but what are you willing to handle if this is not the tarantula like you expected it to be? That's true. Like, we have to think about what, because it's not like an animal where you go to the pet store and you get to, like, interact with it a lot and hold it. And I mean, sometimes you do get to hold it, but it might not act like that all the time. It's not like a dog or cat. So, thinking about, like, is it right to get a pet and then, like, okay, it didn't live up to my expectations, so now I'm just going to quickly find it a home or throw it out, or, like, thinking about the ethics of that decision.
Very true.
Yeah, we got to do our research and think about all the different possibilities of what this animal might do.
Yeah, when I got my first tarantula, it was a rose hair, but it wasn't because I knew it to be a good beginner species so much as that was the only tarantula they had available. They had a shelf of like 15 rose hair tarantulas in deli cups. Like, that was it. And in my mind, like, that was what a tarantula, like, I'm going to get a tarantula. I don't even think I knew it was a rose hair at first. I was like, this is just a tarantula, like, I got a dog, I got a snake. I don't really know what the breed or species of it is. It's just a tarantula. And then I was like, well, this doesn't look like the tarantula that was in Indiana Jones or, Star Trek or something like that. So then I'm like, well, what's the difference between my tarantula and that tarantula? And then I'm like, oh, so they're two different species. It was this, I am probably the quintessential bad pet keeper, because a lot of times I buy the pet and then I do the research, at least, especially when I was younger. It was like, I'm going to get a tarantula and I know the very basic. I know what kind of enclosure it needs and what it eats, and that's about it. I didn't think about species and temperament and all those other things that, but you learn, you live, you learn, I guess. Better, you do better. So, now I do the research before I buy it, but, at first, it was always an afterthought. Like, that's what I want. And then I get it and it's like, okay, now I got to figure out how to take care of it. So when I find somebody that stumbles into the Facebook group or something, or leaves a comment on my Facebook or my YouTube channel or something, and that's where they are, I'm the last person to like criticize them or judge them, because it's like, hey, I've been there. That was me too. I understand where you're coming from. Let's address this. And it's nice to have, like books like yours that I can be like, check out this book. You can download it on Kindle and read it. And it's very relatable. It's got a lot of good information. It's a great place to start, or check out this playlist of videos. And, I wish that kind of information was readily available when I started keeping, And so when I find somebody in the situation I found myself in, I really like to support, or at least direct them in those directions. I downloaded your book and I found it extremely insightful. Like I got it and was kind of like, what can she say about keeping tarantulas that hasn't been said, already 100 different ways. And it was nice that there was all kinds of different information in one spot. And the way that you kind of laid it out, I think is very palatable. It's logical, the way that it kind of goes through everything, but it's also extremely, I don't want to say simple. That's not the right word, but like relatable, Yeah, it's just like, you spell it out it's just not complicated, because I think that's one thing we do in the hobby a lot, especially as keepers, is overcomplicate stuff. Like for the most part, just leave them alone and feed them and you're good. Like you don't need to stress out about the temperatures and the humidities of their endemic location. Like just be cool. We like to overcomplicate stuff in life. And I like that your book wasn't overcomplicated, and the pictures, just the layout of it. It's very classy.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me that you said that, because it's created for beginners, but I'm so happy to hear that even somebody as experienced as yourself, like found it useful and just easy to follow. Because I think that was my goal, is that in any education that I provide, I want to provide multiple people's experiences, not just my own, and put all the evidence out there and what we do know, and be clear that there's still a lot that we don't know and that this information could change, but also like humanizing it. And I did a lot of research before I got into tarantulas. I wasn't like, my personality is not like, I'm going to jump in and figure it out on the way. Like I need to, because I tend to be anxious, I need to prepare. And despite all the research I did, there was still a crap ton I didn't know. So I think that sometimes we forget when a new tarantula owner is having a problem about something that we think, oh, you should know this. Didn't you do your research? They might have done their research. There's a lot that multiple sources don't cover. So I kind of like, my goal was to just not only humanize this information and make it easy to understand and not so intimidating that people steer away from it because it's too much effort to learn. But I also wanted to kind of like put everything in one place, because you're going to have to know things like anatomy. You will have to know about body language. You will have to know, even if you're not handling, you will have to know how can you keep your tarantula safe during tank cleaning, and what techniques have helped me. So yeah, I feel like sometimes we take for granted how much information we've actually learned, and we forget what it's like to start and not know all those little details that actually make a huge difference.
It's very true. Like I actually used your book not too long ago, because I've been keeping for many years, and I've never shipped a tarantula before. You know what I mean? Like I would buy them. I knew how they were shipped, and I would get them out of those kind of situations, but I never was the one to actually ship a tarantula. So how to get it inside and packaged and mailed out safely was not something I was confident about. And, I could go online. I did some research, and there was a lot of different methods, and it wasn't explained very well. And I searched for YouTube videos and was not really confident there, but I was like, wait, I think Patricia's talked about that in her book. So I bring that up on my phone, and I was like, well, oh yeah, there we go. Talked to some other people, like, yeah, that's a good way of doing it. So it was nice that even if it's a book for beginners, there's still stuff in there that, people at any stage can learn from, or at least use as a reference. Like, I'm not exactly sure, so maybe I'll just check out that chapter in the book and get some little information on that. Or, it's nice to also just have another point of view, somebody else's experience, because my experience isn't universally representative, as egotistical as I can be sometimes, and think like, well, my tarantula looks like this, so all tarantulas act like this. And then when things go sideways, it's like, oh shoot, like what do I do now? I was like, so luckily there's other people out there sharing their experiences that I might be able to relate to later on in life, which is kind of nice. But something you talked about how you like to research stuff beforehand. I think that's because I'm the exact opposite. I'm very self-saboteur. I have this like mental attitude that I still struggle with. It's like, that's tomorrow Richard's problem. Like today, this Richard wants to do something, and the consequences won't be for like a week or two down the road. Like that dude can figure it out at that point. Screw that guy. So it's good that somebody like you is out there that I can like learn from. Like I should do more research on whatever it is I'm wanting to do. So I think that's good.
In all of our personalities, there's positives and negatives. Like for me, I might be really good at prepping and trying to cross off all the boxes before I do something, but that also might cause me to procrastinate because I'm scared to take the final jump that you so naturally do. So, what you have is wonderful as well. I think that we all have pros and cons. It takes a lot of courage and trust within yourself to be able to I trust myself enough to figure it out along the way. And ultimately that's what we have to do anyway, because, I'm thinking about what you said about having to pack a tarantula, even with all the information, and we have to be mindful of this when we're being in these groups and we have beginners asking questions, because a tarantula, having a tarantula takes, I want to say, a good amount of guts, because it's an unpredictable creature. It's foreign. Multiple things could go wrong. It is somewhat dangerous depending on what tarantula you have. And there's not going to be a lot of help if things go wrong. You're probably not going to have family members who are willing to look around the house for your tarantula with you. And there aren't many tarantula veterinarians or exotic pet experts in your area who can probably help you. So you're kind of screwed. And so we might know a lot of things, but once we get bitten, once our tarantula escapes, once our tarantula starts having a bad molt, no matter how much we've read, that might all go out the window. So we have to be gentle with each other, that somebody might have really done a lot of research to be prepared, but there's just nothing like being in that moment. And for you, having to figure out how to get this living creature who doesn't want to cooperate into a package it's different. It's different than what you read or what you watch on YouTube. It's just different experience. So your heart is pumping, you're sweating. There's so many things that could go wrong. So we have to be gentle.
Yeah. And I was usually more worried I was going to hurt the tarantula than the tarantula was going to hurt me. And also there's that ego thing. Like I didn't want to be the guy that shipped this tarantula. So people that guy from YouTube did a really crappy job on this tarantula I just got, so it's like, I wanted to live up to that idea that I think people have in me sometimes. So I wanted to make sure I was doing it the best way possible. And I think that's where the whole community aspect of this hobby really comes into play. Is it's important to have many different people working together and supporting each other that have different experiences and different methods, because it makes all of us stronger. If it was just me, or just Tom Moran or just Dark Den or whoever, we would be at a loss, because there are things that I'm not good at. Like people send me pictures of their tarantulas all the time. Like, can you identify the species for me, or can you sex the molt? And it's like, that's not my strong suit. But there are people out there, that can just look at a tarantula, like even a fuzzy picture of a tarantula from far away and be like, that's the species, So I'm like, go talk to that guy about that. That's not my strong suit. If you want to know how to take a good picture of your tarantula, I could help you out possibly, but I'm not the guy that can sex that molt for you. Unless it's extremely obvious, but Tanya, she's one of the admins of my Facebook group. She's really good at sexing molts. So I get those pictures. I'm like, yeah, send them to her. She's got a lot of experience there. I don't sex my molts most of the time because I don't care. I don't care if it's a male or female. I'm taking care of it the same way. And that's just a lot of work for information that I'm not going to really use. If I was a breeder, that would be important. But I understand why some keepers, they really want to know because they want to name their tarantula and they don't want to misgender it or something. You call it Debbie and ends up being a male. So I get it. But Yeah. So that's just not something that's important to me. So it's not something that I am good at. So I don't want to pretend like I am. So I'm glad that there are a wide variety of people with different strong suits in the hobby. And I think that that's why we should be supporting each other and not in conflict with each other. You know, that's why I like to support your magazine and, you know, your YouTube channel, stuff like that. Cause I'm like, there's a lot of stuff I don't talk about because I'm not comfortable with that she talks about. So you should also be getting information from Tarantula Heaven as well, or check out Alex's or Tom's. You know, there's a lot of different resources, and I think it's good that we all have our strong points. And like that, there was another video you had. Oh shoot, what was it about?
Was it the exposure therapy one?
Yes, that was it. Yeah, it was the exposure therapy one. Yeah, I really like that one a lot. Because I think I don't know if I referenced it in my video about handling, but I may have just stolen a couple of your ideas or not stolen, but was like, those are really good points. I'm going to use them as well. Just because people catch a lot of flack. I think from, you know, some people that's why they handle tarantulas, is to get over their fear of arachnophobia and stuff like that. And in those situations, like I know a lot of people that are very well respected in the hobby, you know, dealers and stuff that handle tarantulas as a way of exposing people to them and get them over that fear and realizing these aren't these dangerous creatures. I mean, their goal is to sell tarantulas, you know, so they want you to get it in your hand, just like a car dealer wants to get you in the seat of the car and driving it, you know. It's like, so I understand that, but yeah, the exposure, like that's how I got over my fear of tarantulas, was just by having one in my dorm room in college, you know. And I think it's a very effective way to face those fears. But I couldn't have made a video on it. You could do that very well. You did a very nice job about it.
Thank you. Yeah, because we all have different strengths, and it's important to be able to like cross-reference and provide, just even if it's a different point of view, maybe even something that we're not totally on board with, but just being able to provide different insights for this hobby, because there's so much. But if it's all in different parts, it's hard. So it's good to be able to use each other's knowledge and being able to share that with more people. Yeah, and if like, you know, to continue going back to mental health, if we talk about what arachnophobia does to your life or any type of phobia, it's incredibly distressing. There's no way to totally make your house foolproof of spiders. And so, you know, that for many people, that is how they got over arachnophobia. For myself as well, I didn't have an intense fear of spiders, but my relationship to spiders completely changed once I got my first tarantula. And I actually became much more compassionate towards all living things, to where I'll now even feel bad about killing an ant, because I'm not so afraid of them. I just like really respect. I don't know. It changes you. That's what I'm trying to say, is that having a tarantula can change you.
It really does. Many ways. Like I noticed that when in getting over my fear of spiders by having a tarantula, I was able to identify and learn that a lot of that fear was based in the unknown. Like I didn't understand tarantulas, how they move, how they act, what they eat, their fears. Like in my mind, you know, spiders were just these creepy things up in the corner that would sometimes jump out and attack me. Or I'd get through their web and now I've got a spider that's going to lay eggs in my ear. You know, all these like horrible stories you hear. But by having a tarantula, like a big scary tarantula in my like right next to where I sleep and with me for decades, I learned a lot about its behavior and realized that, okay, it's more scared of me and the environment, you know, than I am of it. And that lesson, that fear was based in my lack of knowledge, was something that would help me in a lot of other situations where, okay, I'm scared of this new relationship. Well, it's because I don't know what's going to happen. Or I'm scared of this new job because I don't know who else works there and I don't know anybody. You know, it's like I was able to identify that a lot of times that fear trigger that gets me stressed out, my heart pumping, is just because I don't know, you know, and it's okay not to know. Like I'll learn and I won't be scared anymore. So I can go into approach a lot more fear in life, knowing that, like from that lesson I learned from keeping tarantulas.
Yeah. And that can go into so many different areas. And like you were able to apply that into so many other areas of your life, like whether you try to address a phobia with exposure therapy or a trauma-based therapy called EMDR. We usually in therapy will also spend a great bit of time in the beginning talking about education, because it usually is that fear of the unknown that makes something really scary. Many tarantula owners have found that once they get really curious and find out how fascinating tarantulas are, that fear kind of goes away. They're like, yeah, I want to learn more, or I want to get closer to this creature that I'm terrified of. And I also think like it also helps us reflect when, like, if we've taken a phobia, learned a lot about it, and then we're able to reduce that fear, we can think about other things in our lives. Like, okay, so why did I have this fear in the first place? Oh, because when I was little, mom was terrified of spiders and told me that they were going to bite me and hurt me. Like, what are other things in my life that I just absorbed as a child because of the people around me or my environment? Like, do I need to be as fearful of other things too? So I think that, in addressing the things and trying to educate ourselves and give ourselves enough knowledge and resources, we can actually expand our lives in a lot of other ways too.
That's very
so I always think about tarantula keeping as another like metaphor for other things, because it's helped me so much in my life and helped open my mind to a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I went from a guy that was terrified of a spider in my apartment and like spraying and stuff like that to keep the spiders out, to now I have created this environment in my basement that is optimal for the tarantulas, which means that it's also an optimal environment for any other spider that decides it would like to live down here. So when I'm like moving enclosures around, I realize I probably have twice as many spiders as I think I do, because there are tons of spiders living in the corners and stuff like that. And that's okay. They help out. Like all the little crickets that escape, they take care of them for me. So I've got my free range spiders and my tarantulas in enclosures. And it's actually kind of funny. I got it right off here to my right. I have a scorpion communal, and they have a pet spider that just kind of lives in there that they don't mess with. And he wandered in there and is like, this is a great place for me to live too. So he's got his own little web and just a little house spider hanging out in the communal. And that's the type of spider I was afraid of. And now it's like, they can just hang out and it's no problem.
That's awesome. That's a nice story. I love that. Yeah. Animals are fascinating. I think we can learn a lot from them, and also by interacting with them.
Do you keep any other exotic pets, or, I mean, is it just your tarantulas and your cat?
Yeah, tarantulas were really the only thing that I got into or wanted to get into. I think scorpions are pretty cool, but I don't have the urge to get any. I think for tarantulas, the fur is the thing that kind of gets me. I like fluffy, furry things. So I like tarantulas. And, right now I don't have any plans to get anything else. Maybe scorpions would be a thing. I'm not sure yet. I kind of just wait until I kind of follow the urge. I don't really force myself to get into things. But right now, my cat actually takes quite a bit of time and expenses because she's got a few health problems. She's 17. So right now, I think I've got all I can handle as far as pets. So I'm just trying to focus on what I've got.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
My wife just got, she's really into adopting dogs that are old. So, and we just got a new cat. We were at the pet store. I needed to stop and get some substrate or something like cork bark or something like that. And they had a I can't remember the name of the organization, but it's not the Humane Society, but it's like an independent kind of pet rescue that just deals in cats. And they had like their little booth out front, and we're trying to get rid of some cats, and it was like a $9 adoption fee or something like that. They're having like a COVID-19 special because they're like, we got more cats that we can deal with, and it's hard for us to get them adopted. And there was a cute little black cat, and my wife was like, I can't say anything when she wants to adopt an animal. I guess it's like, because she can just play that card. Like, seriously, we can't have a cat. You have, hundreds of scorpions and tarantulas. It's like, okay, yeah. He's a nice little cat, but yeah, I like cats, but it's keeping scorpions is not something I ever thought I would do. So I understand where you're coming from. They're definitely not fuzzy and cute, but there's something about them that I was scared of, or not scared of, but I was hesitant to even consider it for a long time because I was like, they're just kind of creepy, and I don't know, they seem dangerous. And but I got one just out of kind of curiosity and opportunity. Like, it was available at a pet shop or at a pet expo, and I picked it up and found that a lot of the things that I like about tarantulas, I also like about scorpions. Like they're the same kind of characteristics and traits, but different. You know, they have different personalities and different environments. And I don't know. I definitely like tarantulas more than scorpions, but I definitely understand the fascination of them, and I'm really kind of digging them. I dig them a lot. So maybe one you should try it.
I definitely find myself warming up to them more. I used to think they were totally gross, but now that I've been in a bunch of tarantula groups, I know that a lot of people will share their scorpion photos in there too. So like I've gotten to the point where I can actually think like, oh, this is a really cool, interesting creature. So maybe I will one day have a scorpion, because that's how I started off with tarantulas. So I don't know, but not this year.
So the Spinerette Magazine is something that you put out every other month. It's a digital magazine. And what kind of topics do you cover in there? Like if somebody was first off, if they were wanting to check out the magazine, how do they find it? How do they download it? And what's in it? What do you talk about?
Yeah, so it's all the issues are on my website, unless you're a Patreon subscriber. I do have a tier that is for the magazine subscriptions. But yeah, they're also sold on my website, tarantulaheaven.com. And there's like a tab for the magazines only. And what you'll always find in every issue is definitely like some basic facts about the tarantula care guide, care sheet stuff. But then like what I really like including is interviews with tarantula keepers who have kept that particular tarantula. Each issue tends to focus on one particular species. So I love to have interviews with different tarantula keepers and, not only ask them about, what is their experience with tarantulas, what do their collections look like, but what's something unique that has helped them? Do they have a do-it-yourself hack, or what's the most important tip that they've ever gotten or interesting observation they've made with this species? Because every tarantula owner kind of says something different. Even if we're talking about the same species, they've all had their own experiences and they all have different perspectives on tarantula care and what they think about this tarantula. So there'd usually be a few interviews. Before COVID, I had a section about like upcoming events. That's not a thing right now. I don't know when that's going to come back. Then there's usually like a community part of the issue where it'll be a bunch of like community collective photographs that have been submitted through people who I was either interviewing or people from my tarantula group. So yeah, and then anything else that I find interesting, I usually try to put like maybe like a feature about like enclosures where people are submitting photos for enclosures. I had an enclosure contest a few months ago that was kind of fun. So yeah, I try to make it fun, try to make it educational. And it's just like about like continuing to educate and provide multiple perspectives.
Very cool. And you've had some pretty big names in the tarantula hobby that you've interviewed in your magazine.
Yeah.
Is that safe to say?
Well, yeah. One of them was yourself. And let's see, the first issue, I got Tom Moran to write something for me, and The Dark Den as well. So that was like a huge, I was so happy and so thankful.
Yeah. And people can go back and get those magazines as well, right?
Yeah.
The whole catalog is available for download. That's awesome. And your YouTube channel, you upload on every Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're upload siblings. We both upload on Tuesdays. It's a good day to upload tarantula videos. It fits very well. I remember I started uploading my videos. I was calling it Tarantula Tuesday, and then I realized you were also saying Tarantula Tuesday. So I'm going back on our respective Facebook pages and YouTube channels and trying to figure out like, all right, who said it first? Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was you. I think is what I did. I think you actually used the Tarantula Tuesday phrase first, but I was like, well, hopefully we're good enough friends that you stay with me.
I wish more people would use it. I wish we could make it like a thing.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool. I had started using that on Tumblr This was before I think I started my newsletter and my YouTube channel and maybe even my website, but I was trying to find catchy, cute captions for my Chilean rose hair pictures. So I would upload like Tarantula Tuesday or Spider Saturdays. And so I was trying to find the one that was catchy, and I guess it was Tarantula Tuesday.
Yeah. I felt bad when I realized that because I was like, I don't even know. In my mind, I came up with that on my own, but I have a feeling that I probably saw some of your posts and Tarantula Tuesday was just catchy enough that it got stuck in my mind. So then I was trying to think, which day should I upload? And like going through all the, what could I call it? And was like, Tarantula Tuesday. That's brilliant. And then I saw that you were doing that. I was like, did I steal that? Oh man, I hope I didn't steal that. I'm so sorry. So it wasn't intentional. I just want to let you know. I wasn't trying to rip you off.
Fine. I'm glad that you ran with it. I wish more people would get in on it.
Yeah, it was just, start a thing. Like everybody uploads their tarantula videos on Tuesday, and it would be pretty cool. So you got your website, tarantulaheaven.com. You got the Instagram. You're sharing a lot of photos and stuff like that of your tarantulas. And anything else going on? Anything else happening out there?
Let's see. Not right now. I don't have any plans for starting any new stuff at the moment. Every few months I'll get an idea, but right now, nothing. I'm trying to just keep things where they're at. Yeah, just trying to think about how I can improve things, whether it's like different topics or interesting content for videos or different things I want to do with the magazine. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's really it. I'm happy with where things are at right now. I'm happy with like continuing to connect with people. And also like work on my own knowledge and absorb information that's out there as well.
I'm really glad that you were willing to come on the podcast and talk to me and talk about mental health and all this stuff. I was really looking forward to it. When I decided I was going to do a podcast, I was kind of like, before I even like hit record for the first time, I wanted to like make a list of topics that I could discuss and people that might be interested in interviewing. And you were right there at the top of the list. I was like, definitely.
Oh, that's an honor.
Not just because, you wrote the book and you have the magazine, but also because you were a therapist. I thought you would have a unique kind of perspective on it. And I really respect your content and the things that you're doing. So I wanted to do what I could to help kind of get the word out about it. And I highly suggest that anybody listening definitely go check out the Spinerette Magazine and, watch some Tarantula Heaven videos. She does a very good job, discusses some very, very interesting topics. And I really like your perspective on stuff. So I will leave, if you're watching the video version of this, I'll be sure to leave links to everything down below in the description. But if you're not, if you're just listening to it, I guess the best way to find your content is just head to your website, right? You got everything linked up there at tarantulaheaven.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited to do this. And like, we've talked so much over the internet. So I'm so glad that we got to do this. This was amazing. So I just thank you so much for what you're doing for the hobby and sharing your knowledge, experience, and making beautiful tarantula content at the same time. And thank you for all of your support. It's been such a joy to stay connected throughout this whole journey.
Yeah, it's interesting doing podcasts through StreamYard and Skype and stuff like that. It'd be much cooler if we could be in person and have these conversations, but maybe one day that'll be a possibility. And you're more than welcome to come back on the podcast anytime if you're willing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is really fun.
Well, thank you to everybody for listening and checking out this podcast. Make sure that you follow the Exotic Pet Collective on, pretty much anywhere that you can listen to podcasts. You'll find it. We're on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. It's all out there. Check out the website, thetarantulacollective.com, if you want to stay up to date. Anytime I'm uploading new podcasts, I'll have that up there, as well as any new videos. And also be sure you're following Patricia on all of her social media platforms. It was a lot of fun talking to you today. Thank you so much for being willing to join me on the podcast, and definitely look forward to having you back on in the future. I still haven't quite figured out how to wrap these podcasts up yet, but thank you all for watching. or for listening. I guess it's a podcast. So thank you all for listening. And I will talk to you all next week. We got some more awesome guests coming up. So you all have a nice week, and we'll see you next time.